Long ago, when men were not yet accustomed to naming the sky by numbers, when the North Star was a guide for those lost in the night, and when every gust of wind blowing across the roof was called the breath of the wind god, the world lived in the whispers of the gods. The world was not perfect then, but it still dreamed. In ancient twilights, people believed that the sun went to sleep in the arms of Helios. Children crying from the fierce wind were soothed by prayers to Boreas. Every dream was sent up into the air with a whisper, and people believed that somewhere someone was listening. But time, like underground streams flowing through rocky gorges, silently eroded all faith. The gods did not disappear in a day. They simply faded, little by little, like the fading of stars in the human city. No longer do we need a night watchman, when electric lights light up every street corner. No longer do we pray for rain when we can touch the button of the water pump. And no longer do we need a guardian of love, when love becomes more transactional than sacred. One day, no one remembers exactly when the gods stopped talking. No thunderbolts from Zeus. No more songs from Apollo. No one sees Artemis in the sky. And the dreams of sleepwalkers, once soaring high to Olympus, are now stuck in the dark corners of forgotten libraries. The world enters a new era. No gods, no myths, no souls. People still live, still build houses, count money, celebrate and love each other. But somewhere deep in the sleep of children, a question sometimes echoes. Why is there still room in my heart for something that no one can name? And then one day, at the end of a world, where the sun sets but never rises again, a child is born with something very old in his eyes. No one can explain why he dreams of stone gates, of stairs reaching to the sky, or of names no one has ever taught him. Hades, Nyx, Athena, Prometheus. The child will go, not on foot, but on a wordless urge, like a call on the wind. He will go in search of not the gods, but the traces of dreams the gods have left behind. A journey begins, not for salvation, not for victory, but to listen to what has been silent for too long. Chapter 1. Where no one speaks the names of the gods anymore. There is a village at the edge of the old world. It has no name, no map, no road to it, except in tattered dreams lost in the night. The village is nestled at the foot of an ancient mountain range, where the rocks are rotten. The roots of trees eat into the cracks of memory. There, people do not talk much. They live slowly, plow the fields, go to bed early, and never step beyond the boundary of the pine trees that bend and whisper to the earth. The people there do not know the names of the gods. They worship the sun, but do not call upon Helios. They bathe in the cool springs, but do not know the sorrow of nymphs. And when the full moon rises in the sky, no one tells the children about Artemis. Only be quiet, lest the moon be angry. There was only one unusual person in the village. An old woman lived alone in a moss-thatched hut deep in the forest, where the trees grew like a web of forgotten memories. People called her Closed Eyes, because she had never opened her eyes in her entire life. No one knew why she was blind. No one remembered where she came from. But on moonlit nights, when all the houses were closed early, people sometimes heard her mumbling, as if telling a story to the darkness itself. Once upon a time, when Olympus breathed, the trees sang and the rocks felt pain. There were those who did not die, but did not live either, and humans were but a whisper between two worlds. No one believed her, until the night everything changed. That day, the sky suddenly became pitch black, though there were no clouds. There was no moon, no stars. Only a dim light like cold dust, falling slowly over the village like snow from the other world. The village child, the youngest, the quietest, the one who had never spoken, suddenly woke up in the middle of the night and said the first sentence of his life. I dreamed a key, and someone was calling. The voice rang out like the wind blowing through a stone forest. His parents were frightened and called the doctor. But no one could cure the dream. No one could remove the image of the key glowing in the child's eyes. And no one could cut the invisible thread that tied the child to the blind old woman in the forest. The next night, the child disappeared. people searched the forest, the mountains, but found only small footprints on the damp ground, leading north, to a jagged rock range that the villagers had avoided for generations, the place they called the road to heaven. Inside the old hut, Mrs. Eyes was dead, but on her chest, people found something, a small piece of marble, sharp as a slash, engraved with words that no one in the village could read. Only the child had seen it. Only the child who carried that old dream, the child without a name, without memories, but within her heart a longing that did not belong to this world. And so, the journey began. No guiding light, no map, no prophecy, no protection. Only one thing, a world without gods, but still with those who could dream of them. The child, not knowing where he was going, not knowing who he was looking for, only knew that if there was anyone who could hear the dreams of myth, then Olympus, though silent, was still waiting. Chapter 2. The Child Who Carried the Still Burning Fire. It walked for 4 days without knowing where it was going. Only its small feet touched the damp earth, the old forest, the cold stone. The sky whispered in a very old way, as if the clouds were also searching for some memory that had been hidden for too long. No one led the way, but in its heart there was a smoldering fire, not something to warm the body, but an unquenchable light in the memory of the soul. On the 5th day, when it reached the foot of a ravine filled with ash, the sky suddenly became dark, not because of the rain, but because the sun seemed not to want to shine anymore. It stood before a barren land, where the branches of the trees were bare like the hands of a person turned to stone. The wind did not blow, but whistled. And in the midst of it all, a small light appeared, flickering like the last breath of an ancient story. It stepped forward. The fire did not burn on wood, but in the earth, like an undying underground spring. And in that fire, a figure appeared, dim, thin, tall as if carved from ashes. The figure had no eyes, no mouth, but had hands, and in his hands was a red flame like the heart of the earth. "Who are you?" the child asked. There was no answer, only an image in his mind. A man who had stolen fire from the hands of the gods to give to men. A man chained to stone, whose intestines were torn out by eagles every day, but who never repented. "Prometheus," the child whispered softly. The figure dissolved like ash, but the fire remained, and it stepped into the child's hands. It continued its journey with a flame that never went out. No smoke, no smell, but a very old light, as if illuminating what no one else could see, a path underground, lines carved in stone, and whispers from the depths of time. One night it stopped by an ancient dead tree, and a dream came, not its dream, but the dream of the one who had kept the flame before. It saw a man chained, a sky on fire, a crowd that no longer looked up, only bowed their heads like blind ants, and a child like it, standing still at the crossroads of silent roads. The dream faded before dawn. It was still dark, but the fire in its hand never weakened. A few days later, it came to a fork in the rocks, where 3 paths led in different directions. On each stone were strange symbols, not words, but carvings, a closed eye, a raised hand, a calm wave. It looked. The fire in its hand suddenly shone its light in the direction of the raised hand. And so it chose that path, without understanding, without knowing what was waiting, because it understood. The one who carries the fire is the one who does not need to see. Just keep the light, even when no one believes in that light anymore. The child, nameless, homeless, is no longer alone. He is the heir of Prometheus, not by blood, but by promise. The promise that there will be people who remember the light, even when the gods have fallen asleep. And at the end of a new path, a stone gate awaits, old, silent, cracked, but never closed. Chapter 3. The Gatekeeper of Tartarus. The deeper you go, the more the space changes. The ground under your feet is no longer soft and moist, but becomes hard and cold like marble exposed to dew. The trees gradually disappear, giving way to upside-down rocks, as tall as house walls, rising in the thick, black fog. It is not bright, nor is it dark. It is just a space without light or darkness, where the boundary between reality and dreams is as blurred as cigarette smoke drifting through cold water. People often call this place the bottom floor. But the ancients, when they still believed in gods, called this place by an ancient name, Tartarus. The Greeks once said that Tartarus was a pit deeper than Hades, where the Titans were banished, where light could not penetrate, and time had no right to pass. But now it was just a forgotten space, devoid of gods and dead, a land that had never been forgiven. And at the edge of that darkness, the child stopped. The fire in his hand, the fire of Prometheus, flickered violently as if blown by a strange wind. The wind carried no breath, only whispers in a language that no longer existed. He was not afraid, but he could not go on, for before him, a giant figure stood blocking his way. He was taller than any idol the child had ever dreamed of. His body was covered with chains around his neck, chains that did not rust, but seemed to be alive. In his hand he held a long stick, not for support, but for counting the steps of time. He had no face, just a blank mass shrouded in mist. And then he spoke, not with his mouth, but as if from the ground. I am the one who has never slept. I am the locked memory, the gatekeeper of things that are not allowed to return. Why have you come here, bringer of fire? The child did not answer. He only held the flame high. The light touched the figure, not dissolving him, but revealing 1,000 sleeping eyes beneath his skin, eyes closed, like sealed souls. That fire, he whispered, is what I last saw before Olympus closed. The fire is not dead, but buried. What did you bring it here for? The child did not know what to say, but an image appeared in his mind, an image of closed mythical doors, Titan spirits weeping in silence, and a blind man's promise that someone would remember. I have not come to deliver, nor to ask permission, the last child said. I have come to listen to what the world has been deaf to for too long. Silence. Then the giant figure moved, very slowly, as if each chain on his body were a piece of history. He swung his staff at the ground. A crack appeared. The fire in the child's hand shone into the crack, and below it was a black stone staircase, carved with symbols that only the soul who had dreamed could read. Go down, he said. But remember, there are no greetings down there. Only souls who are not allowed to remember names. The child stepped down. The space was so cold that time seemed to freeze. Each step echoed like the first heartbeat after centuries of slumber. It did not know where it was going. But at the bottom of each step, it saw vague figures, not people, not gods, but memories. A mother weeping for the loss of a child who was never born. A warrior who had betrayed because he no longer believed in victory. An orphan waiting for a father he had never met. All were silent, turning away as it passed. Only the fire in his hand was still visible. At the end of the steps, a stone gate appeared. No handle, no bolt, just an inscription in a very ancient language. Let me be remembered. The child placed his hand on the door. Fire spread across his skin. The stone trembled. And then the gate opened. Inside, there was no light. Only a voice spoke, as light as flying ash, as slow as time itself. You are the last one to hear me. Then listen to this. The forgotten souls do not disappear. They only wait for a flame to shine upon their names. The child nodded. Then the light in his hand flared, not with a bright light, but with a remembrance, like the eyes of someone who has seen the sun for the last time. It turned back. The gatekeeper was still there. Will you go on? He asked. Will you go? The child replied. Even if you have to go deeper than Tartarus. If there is any soul left dreaming of myths, I will go. The giant figure bowed slightly, not in submission, but out of respect for a small soul, carrying the fire that the gods had lost. Chapter 4. Sea Without Waves. The child left Tartarus when the light in his hand was no longer fire, but an amber mist, warm but not burning, bright but not blinding. He no longer felt cold, nor did he know how long he had been underground. Everything seemed to be carrying him along, not with his feet, but with his memories. In front of him was a gray light, as vast as the sky, but there was no sky above. He looked up and saw only a mist, still, unmoving, neither fading nor deepening. Beneath his feet, the ground was not stone, not sand, but water, still as a mirror, stretching out endlessly. There was no sound of waves, no wind, only absolute silence, so quiet that the child could hear his own heartbeat as an echo from another world. This was the place where the sea had once been, where gods had washed their faces after battle, where Poseidon had awakened them with his giant trident. Now the sea had no waves, not because it was dead, but because there was nothing left to reflect. When people stopped remembering, stopped dreaming, stopped calling the sea as a living entity, the sea itself forgot how to move. The child stepped onto the water. The fire in his hand was not extinguished, but reflected on the water in thousands of faint streaks of light, like fallen stars that had not yet dissipated. A voice rang out, this time not from outside, but from right under his feet. "Where are you going, O bearer of burning memories?" "I am not going," he answered. "I only want to know why no one sings anymore." No one appeared, but the water in front of him suddenly stirred. Not real waves, but the shadows of waves, blurred curves in the wind without form. Then a figure emerged from the water. The figure had no face. Its entire body was as transparent as ice. On its head was a ring of dry, broken coral. Every step it took left behind a ringing sound like a shell falling on a cold stone floor. "I was once the keeper of the sea," he said, his voice like water falling from a crevice in the rocks. "I know every wave, every ship, every prayer whispered in the wind. But now no one remembers me. The sea that no one speaks its name will sleep. I am a part of a memory that has not yet faded, but has not yet been called back." The child did not answer, but only raised the light in his hand. Immediately, the sea around him lit up with blurry images, like a film projected onto water. A ship carrying lost souls that could not find shore. A man standing on a cliff calling the name of someone who had turned into waves. A blue-haired goddess, smiling amid the silver waves, gradually dissolved into mist. "Do you see?" the figure said. "Things that were once real. But forgetting is as powerful as the gods. Once no one remembers, everything, including me, will be nothing." The child was silent. Then he said, "If you are no one, why can I still hear you?" The figure paused. A long beat passed. Then, gently, he bowed his head. Perhaps that flame remembers for the world. He stepped forward. No threats, no pleas. Simply handed the child a small object, a dried, silver ash-colored shell. "Keep it. In it is the last song of the sea, before it fell asleep. When you come near the place where the myth lived, hold it to your ear. Who knows, someone might wake up." Then the figure dissolved. Like water, no one stood in the sea. Just the child, a dry shell, and a still ocean. But this time he heard something new. Not a voice, not a song, but a heartbeat underwater. Slow, very slow, like the heartbeat of a soul not yet ready to vanish. The child bowed to the sea and walked on. He did not know where the shore was, but the fire in his hand had begun to burn again. For perhaps, somewhere under the water, some spirit, some myth, had turned in its sleep. Chapter 5. City of the Former Immortals. The child stepped out of the calm sea, his feet wet with dew, but not mud. There was no clear shore. Only after a gust of wind, very light, he suddenly saw before him ancient white stone steps, leading up to a gray moss-covered hillside. No more water, no more wind, no more calling names. Only stones, stones stretching out like memories turned into paths. And when he reached the top, there was a city before his eyes. The city was deserted, but not deserted. The walls still stood, the dome still stood, each door was still ajar, as if someone had just passed by. The streets were paved with marble, trees grew between the broken-faced statues of gods, and in the air, faint streaks of light passed like the sigh of time. No birds flew, no smoke, but there was a distant echo, like a whisper caught in the wind from thousands of years ago. We were once immortal, but the price was to see everything we loved turn to dust. The child entered the main gate. The flame in his hand now turned silvery blue, no longer blazing, but shining like a dream. With each step he took, images flashed across the street. A crowded banquet, laughter drunk with wine, a beauty dancing in the square when the sun was still a living god. All were memories of those who were once immortal. They are no longer here, but they have not gone far. In a long white stone corridor, the child stopped when he saw a statue standing in the middle, faceless, nameless. At the foot of the statue were the words, Eos, the earliest to rise, the one who opens the gates of heaven to the dawn, and the last to leave the mythical banquet. The statue still shone, not because of the sunlight, but because inside it there was a memory that had not yet turned to stone. The child touched it, and suddenly the whole city lit up. Not a bright light, but blue flames, small as ash, but drifting between the arches, weaving through the streets, drawing human figures from memory. They appear in silhouettes. A couple embracing by a fountain. A bronze-armored gatekeeper, his head turned toward the mountains. A young woman sits on a balcony, combing her hair and singing in a dead language. No one looked at the child, for they no longer existed. They were but the remnants of those who had lived forever, but whose faith had been drained from them by eternity itself. Then, from deep within the center of the square, a figure waited. It was unclear whether it was male or female. There was only a thin halo around its forehead, the mark of those who had worn the crown of time. You carry the fire, the figure said. You carry the sigh of the sea and the dream of Tartarus. Why did you come where no one expected you? The child took the mask, and as the light from the fire touched the gold, the statue of Eos shook, not breaking, but smiling. Then the entire city fell silent. No more human figures. No more memories. Only the child stood in the center, holding the mask in one hand, the fire in the other, and in his heart another fragment of the dream that had been carved into the sky. The child turned away. No one saw him off, for the immortals were asleep. But somewhere, behind the white stone arches, a voice sang softly, "We are not dead. We are only waiting for someone brave enough to remember his name." Chapter 6. The Mountain That No One Climbs Anymore. After the silent city, the child walked once more. At this moment, the wind began to return. Not cold, not steamy, but like the breath of the souls who once lived on the peak. The sky ahead gradually opened up, no longer gloomy, but carrying a very strange light, not of the sun, nor of the moon, but a nameless light, shining from ancient memories, from the legends left in the bones of the earth and rocks. And then the mountain appeared. The mountain was not large, but so high that no one could see the top. Clouds coiled around its back like torn sacred robes. The gray rocks were sharp like vows not kept. There were no trees, no roads, no footprints, only a broken stone pillar at the foot of the mountain, engraved with a faint inscription, "Where the gods lived, and from which they departed." No one climbed any further, not because it was impossible, but since the god fell silent, no one dared to ask for directions. But the child did not hesitate. He stepped forward. The fire in his hand seemed to shrink, but it was brighter than ever. The golden mask was tucked away in his pocket, as if it were smoldering with the heartbeat of the Rocky Mountain. Every step was a question. Is anyone still listening? Were you really there? Or is it all just a story that lingers on like the dreams of mankind that refuse to grow up? The wind did not answer, but the rocks trembled slightly, and images gradually appeared on the cliffs, dim, old, trembling. An old Zeus leaning back on his throne, an Athena removing her helmet, hiding her last words in her hand, a Hermes removing his sandals' wings, letting them fall to earth. Not a victory, but a retreat that no one witnessed. The child climbed high. His legs were scraped, his hands were bleeding, but his eyes were still bright. His heart still heard the small songs echoing from the sky, like the wind repeating the songs that humans used to call the gods. And then, after a distance where there was no air, no color, no boundaries, he came to a flat stone platform at the top. On the top of the mountain, there was no throne, no pillars, only a circle of stones, empty. In the middle of a circle was a hollow in the shape of a sitting person, covered with green moss and dust. But when the child placed the fire in the middle of the circle, the wind stopped, and a very old voice rang out, "You have come, not to find me, but to remind me that I once existed." No one appeared, only thin beams of light, each one a part of a voice. We are not dead. We have withdrawn ourselves from the world, because men chose to believe otherwise. But the fire that Prometheus left, the sea without waves, the city of white stone, all still await a child. To dare to climb, to dare to remember, to dare to listen. The child opened his pocket. The golden mask trembled, then rose into the air. He put it on, and he saw everything. The final image of the gods meeting on Mount Olympus and deciding to be silent. The promises not kept. The pain the gods endured when humans forgot them and still lived. And finally, a portal opened in the sky, leading to a place where no god had the courage to return. The child took off his mask. He did not cry. He just looked down at the foot of the mountain where the clouds still drifted. And he said, "I do not want you to come back, but I will tell the world that you were here once and loved humanity so much that you chose to remain silent forever." The wind blew again, softly. The fire in his hand was no longer a shape, just a trace of light in his palm. But it was enough. Chapter 7. The Fire-Bringer Returns. When the child stepped down from the unclimbed mountaintop, the world seemed to have changed. It was unclear whether it was because of the passage of time, or because the light within it had changed. Underfoot, the rocks were still cold, but no longer silent. They trembled slightly under each of its steps, like vague responses from the earth, like a discreet greeting from a newly awakened myth. No one was waiting. No one was calling. But this time the wind blew in the opposite direction, from below to above, as if it wanted to hold it back or as a way of sending it off. The child did not turn his head. He walked slowly, but surely. His hand held the fire, now no longer burning, just a halo of light lying still in his palm, gentle like a small piece of his soul. The mask of memory was hidden deep in his pocket. No need to wear it, because now he had seen enough. The way back was not the same as when he had left. Not because the road had changed, but because it has become part of what is lost. Stepping through each old place, everything begins to answer. Where the white stone city slept, the broken statues began to heal one by one. A faint sound came from the fountain, the first drop of water. A streak of light flew across the sky above the city, not sure if it was a shooting star or a flash of memory. Where the sea had no waves, the surface of the water rippled slightly, not from the wind, but from a short breath, weak but real. As the child passed by, the conch shell in his pocket vibrated, and from it a small song came as if left in the throat of the last sea god. And at the edge of Tartarus, where the gatekeeper stood still, his chains swaying gently. "Did you see?" he asked. "Not with your eyes," the child replied, "with your memories." "And where are you going now?" "To where men still dream, where children still ask the names of the stars." The gatekeeper nodded. Then, for the first time, one of the thousands of eyes on his body opened. Not red, not bright, just an old brown, like winter soil. "Then go. But don't forget, once you bring back memories, the world will try to kill it, with noise, with busyness, with truth." "I don't keep the fire to fight," the child replied. "I keep it to light." The final path opened up, not a cave, not an ocean, not a mountain, but a field stretched out, filled with soft light. There, for the first time, the sun rose. But not brightly. It rose like a name, shining on the child's face, revealing eyes that were no longer afraid of the dark. As it crossed the field, people emerged one by one. Not gods, not ghosts, but ordinary people, children sleeping, old men sitting on porches, sleepwalkers and addicts. They did not see the child, but the light in his hand, shining into their dreams. A child dreamed of a stone gate opening. A girl saw herself dressed in white, talking to a faceless goddess. A man dreamed he was crying on a mountaintop where an empty throne stood. No one called. No one touched. But all heard again what they had known. When the child reached the edge of the world, where the mist had once blocked it, it stopped. No one waited. There was only a mirror lying in the grass. It looked into it, and for the first time saw itself. Not a hero, not a god, just a child, small, eyes full of dust. But in his hand still fire. "Now tell," said a very old voice, from heaven, earth, or his heart, it was unclear. "Tell the world. We once had gods. We once had dreams. We once lit fires in the darkness. And once there was a child who was not afraid to remember." The fire trembled, not because of the wind, but because someone somewhere had begun to believe again. Chapter 8. Memoirs of the Human Race. After the child crossed the final boundary of darkness, the flame in his hand was no longer an object, no longer burning, no longer a shape. It was only a self-illuminating memory, like old dreams that had never been written down. The world was still silent, but the silence was no longer empty. Every dewdrop carried something like a whisper. Every gentle breeze carried within it the scent of forgotten days. And the earth, though it did not sing, still trembled slightly, like pages of a book about to be opened again. No one noticed. But that night, thousands of people dreamed the same dream. A mother saw herself standing on Mount Olympus, speaking to an unknown goddess. A child dreamed that the light in his hand turned into a bird flying over the wilderness. An old man saw the calm sea opening before him, and that he himself had been the gatekeeper between the two worlds. No one spoke, but the next morning, many people wrote down things they didn't understand why they remembered. And that is where the memoir begins. Not a book, no author, but a stream of words passed from mouth to page, from old hands to sleeping children. In ancient times, people lived among myths, not to obey, but to fear, to dream, and to know their insignificance. The gods were not always right. They were jealous, angry, and sometimes afraid of humans themselves. And then one day, when we stopped believing, they fell silent. Not because they were forgotten, but because they chose to be silent, to see how humans lived when they were no longer looked up to. The memoir continues, but in an era where no one spoke of gods. There was a child, carrying fire into the deepest oblivion, listening to every old heartbeat, and telling the story with his own fearless silence. From those forgotten dreams, people began to draw blurred images. A halo swirling around an unclimbed mountain. A pair of eyes open in the middle of a calm sea. A child walks through a city of white stone, and the statues of gods bow. No one teaches them. No one tells each story. But everyone feels as if they have been there. Then poets begin to write poems without rhyme. Children draw giant arms on the walls, golden masks, halos on foreheads. Old people begin to tell myths to each other, not to teach, but as a way to preserve what has not yet completely dissolved. And in all the stories told, there is a name that no one remembers clearly, but everyone recalls. He is the one who brings fire. He is the child who asks nothing from the gods, only wants to remember. Be the last to go up, and return with a fire that does not burn. The child does not become a king, does not establish a religion, does not perform miracles. He only lives, like a small ink stain in the great memoir of mankind. And from the light he brings, each person writes a new chapter, not with a pen, but with a different way of life. Someday, if someone asks, "How do we know that God exists?" he will not give evidence. He will only smile and say, "Because I dreamed, and that dream was more real than anything I have learned." Open book, the memoir of mankind has no end, because it is still being written, page by page, night by night, each time a fire in someone's hand lights up, even if only in a dream. The child does not become a king, does not establish a religion, does not perform miracles. He only lives, like a small ink stain in the great memoir of mankind. And from the light it brings, each person writes a new chapter, not with a pen, but with a different way of living. Someday, if someone asks, "How do we know that God exists?" people will not give evidence. Just smile and say, "Because I dreamed. And that dream was more real than anything I have learned." Open book, the memoir of mankind has no end, because it is still being written, page by page, night by night, each time the fire in someone's hand lights up, even if only in a dream. Chapter 9. When the last man called the name of God. The world after the fire did not shine brightly. It did not change dramatically. But underground, on the windward side, between each sleep, a very small thing changed. No one remembers exactly how much time has passed. All we know is that in a very far away, very old place, a hill rose in the middle of the plain. No one built it. No one gave birth to it. People called it Silent Hill. There was no temple, no statue. But everyone knew, if you stood on the top of the hill at dawn and called a name that no one remembered anymore, the wind would answer with a slight tremor in the heart. And then, one early autumn morning, when the sky was not yet bright, when the mist still covered it like an ancient breath, a little girl appeared. No one knew where she came from. No name, no guide. There was only a small loop of string tied around his wrist, on which was engraved a faint inscription, Mnemosyne. The girl climbed the mound of silence. She did not speak. She did not sing. She just sat down and took from her pocket an old golden mask. It was the mask of the child who had brought the fire. And now the mask had changed hands. She put it on, and immediately all the sounds disappeared. No bird sang. No wind. Only vague memories passed through her mind, like the dreams of millions of souls. A father telling his son a fairy tale before bed. An old woman drawing a god on a wall with burning charcoal. A blacksmith carving the name Hermes into the handle of his hammer, without knowing why. Then the girl stood up. She raised her head and whispered a name, just one. No one heard clearly, but the sky trembled for a moment. A soft light shone through the mist, and in a place no one reaches, a name is heard again. From far away, in the heart of a dead mountain, a deep, ancient voice sang, not a human voice, not a god, but a voice of recognition. We do not need anyone to worship us. Just someone dares to call our name, not for power, but for having been a part of the human dream. The girl took off her mask, set it on the ground, and left. No one knew who she was. No one remembered her face. But after that morning, the mound of silence was no longer silent. Every night, people heard the names of the old gods calling out in their dreams, not to beg, but to connect with what had been eternal. When the last person called the name of the gods did not return, but their silence was no longer heavy, and the small flame in the human heart, however fragile, has never been extinguished. Chapter 10. And the light that never fade. When the third sun rose in the nameless sky, no one called it God. No one bowed, no one prayed. But in every gaze there was a silent reverence, not out of fear, but out of the memory of something old, once sacred. The world had no more temples, no more stone statues, no more tablets bearing the names of Zeus, Athena, or Apollo. But a strange thing happened. Children began to dream again. They drew strange wings on the walls. They named the winds. They looked up at the sky and asked, "If there is no God, who lit the first stars?" The adults smiled. No answer, because they knew gods do not need to be proven. Just to be dreamed of is to come alive. In one corner of the world, a rotten golden mask was found, lying between two stones stacked like a chair. No one took it. No one sold it. Only a small wooden board was stuck beside it. This was once the face of memory. Whoever sees it, please remember. The child of yesteryear is no longer there. Maybe it is old. Maybe it never existed. Or maybe it has melted into the small flames in each person's heart. An old poet wrote in his last notebook, "I lived a time when no one called the gods by name. But in my dreams, I saw them, and the light they left behind has never gone out." The story has no ending, because nothing is truly over when someone remembers. The gods are silent not because they have been abandoned, but because they know that their presence is strongest when they do not need to speak. At the end of a field, a silent mushroom grows under the roots of an ancient oak. Someone wrote in charcoal, "We are the unfinished dream of immortality." The last night before the last page closes, a soft female voice like the wind blows into the ear of someone sleeping. Do not try to rebuild the temple. Do not carve my name in stone again. Just when the child asks, "Was there anyone here before us?" smile and whisper, "Yes." And they left a light that never went out. And when all is silent, no more calls, no more names to remember, the light remains. Not as fierce as Zeus's thunder, not as brilliant as Apollo's halo, not as mysterious as Athena's wisdom, but a small light, enough for each person to light his own way toward his dream. Mythology does not die, because it does not live like humans. It only sleeps, waiting for someone to lay hands on memory and dare to dream again what was eternal. If you ever wonder, who am I in a world without gods? Remember, you are the last keeper of the flame, and that light has never burned out. Thank you for coming all the way. See you in another dream.